Al was playing with Texas this year under a contract that he signed back in '78, and he was making a lot for most of us, but not a lot by baseball standards. He was making approximately $300,000 a year. The present contract provides for Al, including bonuses, etc., to earn approximately $775,000 a year.
What has this done for Al's personal point of view, getting to Montreal and getting with a contender, you think?
Well, Al and I have joked about it. I came south about 12 years ago and feels the best move I made. And Al went from Texas to Montreal and feels he's going north, and that's the best move he's ever made. Al's been the forgotten guy in baseball, and he had, I think, a real psychological problem about it. Not too many people realize that Al has got about 2,400 hits now. Plays another several years, he'll make that 3,000 hit plateau and a chance for the Hall of Fame.
What about my Jazzy Juniors? Yeah, all the sophisticated seniors right on the air. Let me hear for number one, y'all. So yeah, get ready to get us a winner. Number 5 is Scorpio. Rock like me. Everybody rock like me. Come on, everybody. Yeah.
Those type of situations that you will
I think I can fit in well in the starting job. It's just a matter of who learn the stuff faster and, who the coaches want to play.
How about the Bama defense? Tough as always?
It's going to be very tough. Our second unit this year is going to be admirable. Usually whenever you take your first team up with your second team in, it has its weakness, but I don't think it'll be that case this year. I think second team will be just as good as first team.
Last year you led the SEC in punting. What kind of goals you got set for yourself this year?
My goal this year is just to come back and to keep myself, working hard to help the team the best I can. Maybe give up a couple extra yards for maybe a coffin corner kick or something like that. But if I win the SEC again, that'd be great. But I'm just going to do the best I possibly can do right now.
At the end of last spring, many felt that the Trojans of Charles Henderson High School in Troy would be one of the top 3A teams in the state. But since that time, injuries and sickness have decimated the squad. Coach Jay Jeffcoat is concerned.
We lost 4 starters before we ever came out, and then we've lost 1 to a knee injury, and then we got 4 out of practice besides him that have injuries, and then we have 9 right now just for some type of flu bug. So right now we're right decimated by injuries and sickness, and it's really having an effect on us.
Did you feel you had the team to do it before all this?
We felt like we had the potential to be a real good football team, but right now it's going to take some changes in the circumstances for us to have a good football team. It's going to be a struggle from now on.
Last year the Trojans were 6-4, and if they are to improve on that performance this season, Jeffcoat says a number of sophomores must come through. If that happens, the Trojans look to be strong and possible contenders for the state 3A championship they won back in 1980. Charles Henderson opens on the road September 3rd in Opp. Tonight at 10, the defending state 3A champs, Eufaula. On the road with high school football preview, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Troy. When you're the champion, everyone guns for you. And no doubt that's the dilemma this season of the defending state 3A champs, the Eufaula Tigers. But Coach George Cochran accepts that challenge, and well, he should. The Tigers have been in the playoffs 4 straight years, and Cochran says this upcoming squad could be better than any previous.
Well, we feel like our football team this year probably has physically a little more talent than our football team had last year. To go all the way and win a 3A title, it takes a little luck and things have to go your way. Our football team last year, they had a lot of ingredients that I hope this team has, but we won't know till we let them play a little bit.
If there's a thorn in the side of Eufaula football for this coming season, it has to be the schedule. Only 8 teams are currently scheduled, and during one stretch of September, Eufaula has 3 straight weeks off. Defense of the state 3A crown for Eufaula begins on the road at Dothan on the 27th. Tomorrow, we're off to Ayrton and Tuskegee. On the road with a look at high school football, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Eufaula.
Oh yes, I'm ready to put all that bad stuff behind and just start all over. I think I got my head together, and like Coach Bryant said, he wished he could reach me. I think he didn't reach me, so I'm ready to just get my head together, think about the football in my future now.
Do you feel going into the season that you got it together better than at any other time at Alabama?
Well, yes, I would have to say that because my freshman year I didn't have to run the mile, but my sophomore year I had to, and I wasn't as mentally ready for it as I was this year. And plus I'm a year older, and I just feel a lot better about going off into it, and I know what I got to do now. I know what the team want me to do and the coaching.
A lot of people say Lenny Patrick can do almost anything he wants to do as far as a running back goes. Do you hold that feeling too?
Well, you can't doubt what any man can do. You don't know what kind of abilities he got. He can do just about anything. There's no telling, and I feel like I can run the ball quite well, right? And there's just no telling what I can do.
In the 7 years Coach Dick Chastain has been at Ayrton High School, the Purple Cats have made it to the state 1A playoffs 3 of those seasons. Last year, Ayrton just missed the finals, losing to McKenzie in the semis. But gone from that 12-1 team is the nucleus of a very fine line. And in order to repeat last year's performance, adequate replacements must be found.
We lost some linemen that had been starting for 3 years, and we had 1 or 2 kids that we figured up, and they had started in every ball game offensively and defensively for the past 3 years, so it's hard to place those kind of kids.
Due to a different alignment of Region 3 Area 5, the Purple Cats will have to win just 2 area games to make it back to the playoffs this season. But Coach Chastain is taking no one lightly in a schedule that includes a pair of 2As and a 3A. The Purple Cats will open their season here at home Friday night the 27th against 2A Goshen. On the road with high school football previews, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Ayrton.
Very much, Jack. As mayor of the city, it is a great pleasure for me to be here to dedicate this event's calendar. I am proud of downtown Union Bank, Mr. Henry Leslie. Mr. Leslie, thank you for doing this morning, sir. Last without how about that? All set? All set. Let's go. All right. Congratulations. Thank you.
Governor, as you know, this is called to authorize the funding of those projects. Rick, I believe it's called the motion.
Give strength to our community. I'm looking forward to the day when the other end of the street down here at Commerce that we Henry Leslie. So Leslie, thank you for doing this. All set. Let's go. All right.
On behalf of myself and the employees of Red Lobster Restaurant, it's a great pleasure to present this
Having a good time. Camera. Smile. I have to stand up straight and hold myself. I can't tell you how dear it is to all of us that all of you employees here at Red Lobster did this yourselves, and we're very... We'll tell him afterwards what the party was about.
I don't know if I can see it.
According to Representative Wyatt, the employee reduction is an attempt to move the sale of alcoholic beverages to the private sector.
I am, as of now, calling on Governor Fob James and Joe Broadwater, who happens to be the head of the ABC board here in Alabama, and I am asking them to stop the layoff of state employees that they have announced that will become effective this week.
Just because we're authorized to spend the money is no reason for us to flagrantly spend money or to hire people that we don't need. We're the stewards of that money, and it's our job to handle it in a responsible manner and to staff the stores in a manner that we give the public the service that they deserve and that they need, and I think we can do that.
The governor's office says Representative Wyatt's charge that the James administration is trying to move the liquor business to the private sector isn't true. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
To our budget.
All candidates seeking the ADC's endorsement must meet personally with the black leaders for individual screenings. Then on Saturday, the ADC will decide who's going to get the endorsement. Some ADC officials say the organization could use the option not to endorse anyone, but leaders say they don't want to exercise that alternative.
When ADC officials begin screening the candidates, particularly in the governor's race, they'll be asking the political hopefuls to make several commitments in order to win their endorsement. Officials say one of the commitments they'll be seeking is the appointment of blacks to several state agencies.
Officials say all the Democratic gubernatorial candidates will be at the convention. Historically, gubernatorial candidates endorsed by ADC haven't been elected, but have been in the runoffs. This year, black leaders hope to change that.
I will say this, we're hoping that the candidate, we don't know who we're going to endorse, so we'll just have to wait until Saturday. But if the record holds, I would expect that the candidate that we would endorse would be in the runoff, at least.
Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Next man to be presented, Kim will come in.
That was where we first became the owners, or indeed the lessees of these two railroads.
Mississippi, of course, he came eastward across Mississippi. He was met by a great throng.
If 15-year administrators get a bonus from the Montgomery County School Board, then teachers, principals, and support personnel should too, so says UNICEF Director Robert Smiley. Last month, the board decided to give a one-time 10% bonus to central office administrators who've been with the school system 15 years. Board member Henry Spears wanted to grant across-the-board bonuses then, but he was outvoted. Still, the board agreed to give the idea another hearing and will discuss the bonuses at its next meeting in September. Smiley says it's only fair to reward all school employees for 15 years of service. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
I'm going to give him a best shot, yes. That's a position a lot of people like to hold. Coming out of spring and then going into the fall, Coach Bryan, he has a final say-so on who's going to be the starting quarterback. And I just wait until then. I'm just going to go out there and give it all I got and hopefully being the starting quarterback for the first game. that'll prove true for me.
Offense sure looks to be tough with everybody coming back with the tight end.
Yes, we've gotten that experience. I think we need all those guys coming back. That's going to help us, taking that leadership position up there and just really, hopefully showing, what it's really like up there and proving to be successful.
Coming out of spring, everybody's talking Walter Lewis, starting quarterback at Alabama, but everybody seems to forget Ken Coley. You're back and you're ready to go, aren't you?
Well, I've worked out real hard. I've tried to get my knee back in shape, but not taking anything away from Walter. He earned the spot in the spring. He had a real good spring, and in the fall he came in and he moved the team, and that's what it took for us, and I think right now he deserves it.
There have been rumors you might be moved to defense. Any truth to it?
To tell you the truth, I don't know myself. I've just come down here. I've heard several things, and I'm just going to, get ready and practice, and wherever they want me, that's where I'm going to play.
On the Tennessee Tom Baker, that's correct.
Bob, do we have any barges going past there?
I think we will have them.
Under the appropriations bill for that GO fund.
Motion to carries, indicate their
Governor James met with Justice Department officials for about 3 hours yesterday to size up their support for his request to ask the federal courts to drop the decade-old suits. The governor said today he felt the problem was more legal than procedural because of commitments made by prior administrations. The governor says his talks with the Justice Department deal with modifying some of those commitments.
Most of their concerns are untangling the legal mess that was created some 10, 15 years ago, and doing that legally. It's much harder to untangle a lawsuit than if you started from scratch and created a lawsuit.
But the governor says he thinks the final chapter of the prison and mental health court orders is underway.
But I believe the final court action that will be initiated by this administration within the next 90 days upon its final adjudication, the state of Alabama will be free and clear of those restrictions.
As it relates to prisons and a story yesterday indicating they were out of money, the governor insisted the state wasn't suffering any crisis in the general fund, saying the taxpayers send plenty of money to run state government.
It wasn't 90 days ago that the Senate gave the judges a 20-30% pay raise, $1 million or more that got to be paid this year. It wasn't too many months ago that we gave 11 to 15% pay raises, $120, $130 million.
The governor said the state would be in great shape if legislators unearmarked most taxes and passed his retirement reform. And he says he intends to give the legislature plenty of opportunities in the next 5 months to correct what he called the structural deficiencies. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
ADC leaders say nearly all candidates have been actively seeking the Black Political Caucus's endorsement. Officials say their final decision to endorse or possibly not to endorse certain candidates will come Saturday. But first, Black leaders will individually screen the candidates. All political hopefuls seeking the group's endorsement must attend the convention. Group leaders will be looking for promises and commitments from the candidates, especially in the governor's race, like appointing blacks to state agencies and the board of registrars in counties that have a black population of 20% or more. The group is presenting Governor James the John F. Kennedy Profile Courage Award for appointing a record number of blacks to state and local boards, agencies, and the courts. The candidates who are endorsed will find out Saturday evening.
At 5:30, we will make the official announcement, at least Chairman Joe Reed will, regarding the candidates we will be endorsing. In other words, we'll have a press conference at 5:30. The candidates we've endorsed already in legislative races, the candidates we will endorse on Saturday will be announced.
Mr. Gray says hopefully this election, ADC's candidate selection, will produce winners at the polls in the September primary and the November general election.
These will be
Kim
our
Davis,
members throughout the
WSFA
state.
TV News.
For the past decade, the U.S. Justice Department has been a legal adversary in a federal court suit to improve the state's prisons and mental health systems. For the past several months, Governor James has been periodically meeting with those Justice Department officials, hoping to convince them that the state is virtually complying in all areas of the court orders.
You've got to remember this is a These are lawsuits that are 8, 10 years old. There were agreements made back then that probably acquiesced, as far as the state is concerned, as to what the courts really had the authority to do.
The governor says he doesn't blame any administration for those commitments, but he says he feels they may have agreed to too much. But now the governor says he thinks the final chapter is being written.
I believe that we will either terminate it or go into court with a position that when it is fully adjudicated, it will terminate. Now, whether that will be Christmas or whether it will be February or March, nobody knows.
The governor says a court hearing to dismiss the federal court suit over prisons is scheduled for mid-September, and a similar request relating to mental health system is tentatively scheduled in November. A third major battle involves the Justice Department's involvement in the racial makeup of the state trooper force. The governor says the Justice Department appears open to negotiations to end that decade-old federal involvement as well. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Come right in, Mr. Taylor. Again, I saw Mr. Taylor.
And Jim Golden is on the board of education.
Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate it, and if you're back home, we'll be most grateful for the work. Thank you, sir. There he is. Do you want to move? I got a flat bag right here. I know this person won't Ben said his was about a Vincent Sparks, Superintendent of Gunnersville, Dr. Taylor, Superintendent of Dr. Wilson, Superintendent of Marshall County.
Well, we'd like to see you folks.
That's what
That the other 25 systems and those who received it previously have received money from this.
Justification of this special needs board is some $12 million of critical needs. In addition,
Passing us over.
64 grants. Cut that by 4,000.
We have spent local funds in order to initiate the project. We've hired an architect, we've hired a consultant, and we have proceeded and had hoped to do the abatement this summer, but we are at a standstill now, and we feel we're desperate.
Any questions?
examine that, though, to make sure it's in there. But I mean, to be within the law as we're.
To do this for the two positions, we have a number of people to come before.
State Representatives Charles Langford and Cecil Wyatt have large numbers of state employees in their districts, and they don't want to see some of them lose their jobs. They told reporters now isn't the time to increase unemployment in the state, and they called on Governor Fob James and Alcoholic Beverage Control Board Administrator Joe Broadwater to halt the layoffs.
To some degree, it is a political maneuver. I also do believe that it is an attempt of this administration to move the sale of alcoholic beverage from the state to the private sector.
I don't have any idea what he's referring to as them being politically motivated. This is unpleasant. It would be much easier to just not do this. But in order to be responsible, we've reached a point that we've got too many jobs. It's that simple, and the only thing to do when you have too many jobs is do away with those jobs. We don't need those jobs to run the stores.
Broadwater says he discussed the layoffs with Governor James prior to sending out notices to the employees affected. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
To our budget and to profit.
In the 7 years Coach Dick Chastain has been at Ayrton High School, the Purple Cats have made it to the state 1A playoffs 3 of those seasons. Last year, Ayrton just missed the finals, losing to McKenzie in the semis. But gone from that 12-1 team is the nucleus of a very fine line. And in order to repeat last year's performance, adequate replacements must be found.
Yes, that was the biggest loss. We lost some linemen that had been starting for 3 years. And we had 1 or 2 kids that we figured up, and they had started in every ball game offensively and defensively for the past 3 years, so it's hard to place those kind of kids.
Due to a different alignment of Region 3 Area 5, the Purple Cats will have to win just 2 area games to make it back to the playoffs this season. But Coach Chastain is taking no one lightly in a schedule that includes a pair of 2As and a 3A. The Purple Cats will open their season here at home Friday night the 27th against 2A Goshen. On the road with high school football previews, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Ayrton. The Tuskegee Institute Tigers are entering a new football era. This season, they've dropped a classification from 4A to 3A. And according to second-year coach Stanley King, it couldn't come at a better time. The Tigers were 3-6 last season, and losses to graduation are heavy, particularly on offense, where 10 of 11 starters are gone.
I think our strength basically lies with the defense. Defensively, we will return about 7 starters. And offensively, they're going to be going both ways, and our depth seems to be our biggest weakness right now.
Despite dropping to 3A, Tuskegee will still play 4A rivals Opelika and Auburn, as well as tough region opponents like Stanhope Elmore and Wetumpka. King just hopes his inexperienced squad can better last season's disappointing mark. Tuskegee will open with Elmore County Friday the 27th at home. Tomorrow night, our road show goes to Auburn and Alex City. With high school football previews, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Tuskegee.
Every year, Alabama farmers optimistically plant their commodities and hope the rain will come when it's needed. And for the most part this summer, Alabama crops have received plenty of water. Here in the mountains of Blount and St. Clair counties in the northeastern part of the state, the corn is green and lush. But over 100 tomato producers in the area are ruined. The reason?
We really appreciate the rain, but when you get as much as 15 inches in 1 month, it's too much. It's just completely burns you.
Bobby Robertson says he's lost at least $100,000 in out-of-pocket costs because his rain-gorged tomatoes are so juicy they're rotting, either on the vine or during shipment. So Robertson and other growers have been forced to plow up many of their tomatoes or discard them in giant mounds. He says buyers for chain stores are rejecting much of the area's low-grade tomatoes and are purchasing tomatoes from out of state. Nearby at her Straight Mountain tomato shed, Nilla Jean Beard and her husband were counting on a good production year after suffering several poor years in a row and sinking deeper into debt in order to stay in business. The Beards are selling everything they can any way they can. Here offering baskets of tomatoes which would sell in grocery stores for about $14 for $1. Unfortunately, the cost to grow, pick, and box these same tomatoes approaches $3. It doesn't take a degree in mathematics to see that the Beards are in trouble.
It feels just like you want to get out somewhere and just give it up. Just like to leave. It's all bad.
There is more at stake here than just the livelihood of the growers. The local economy, much of it built around area fruits and vegetable farms, is feeling the pinch. Local and migrant farm hands are only working about 10% of their normal hours. There simply is nothing to pick. Government officials with the Extension Service and the Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Service put the loss of the tomato crop at 80%, which translates into $6 million in lost earnings in St. Clair and Blount counties alone. And other commodities like melons and cucumbers are also severely damaged. It's ironic that the very thing that brings life to their crops has in this instance brought a disaster that many growers will never recover from. Holly Midgley reporting.
all new state employees
Last June,
and
when Governor
teachers
James
hired
called the legislature into special
October
session,
1 of
he asked lawmakers to
1982
pass
or thereafter.
legislation to change the state retirement systems.
I have proposed constructed reform measures that will reduce the cost of the retirement systems to the taxpayers by $40 million a year.
But the head of the retirement systems, Dr. David Bronner, says some changes were made by the Employees Retirement Board before the special session was called.
Basically, what I'm saying is that that number of 40 million was correct about 6 months, a year ago. It is no longer correct. The amount of money that you would save the state is roughly 24, 25 million if you did his program. And of that 25 million, almost all of it, 22, 23 million, is in the Alabama Special Educational Trust Fund, whereas you would only save about 2 or 3 million in the employees' retirement system.
Which would be general fund money, basically.
That's correct.
According to retirement system officials, more than $11 million was cut out of next fiscal year's appropriation to the employees system and was appropriated elsewhere in the general fund by the legislature in the regular session. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
State Revenue Department officials took the case to the Supreme Court after a Montgomery Circuit Court ruled the KinderCare Learning Centers did not have to pay property taxes because the centers were devoted to educational purposes. The Montgomery-based company operates 750 daycare centers nationwide, with 37 located in Alabama. The lower court's decision held that the assessment of ad valorem taxes on KinderCare property in the state during the tax years of 1977 and 1978 was illegal and void. In its decision today, the High Court said state law provides a tax exemption for property devoted exclusively to religious, educational, or charitable purposes. The justices said KinderCare property is not used exclusively for education, and its centers are not schools within the meaning of Alabama law. The High Court also said KinderCare does not qualify as a private school, and attendance at its centers would not satisfy the compulsory state attendance laws, and also pointed out, even though the company is regulated by the Alabama Department of Pensions and Security, it's not licensed or accredited by the State Department of Education. KinderCare Executive Vice President Richard Grassgreen disagrees with the court and says the centers are educational facilities.
We spend a lot of effort providing an educational program for our children. In fact, we enhance our program through various different things that we're testing, such as a computer program in Houston, Texas, and Minneapolis. In addition to that, it says we're not regulated by the Department of Education. That is basically the state's decision. The state of Alabama desires to have us regulated by the Department of Pensions and Securities.
Matt Carmack, WSFA TV News.
He did a pretty good job. He could use the radio and that sort of thing.
Oh, no.
Huh?
You got.
What you got?
Can you wait for the man? See y'all later. Okay.
Next week, this schoolyard at Millbrook Middle School will be filled with children. Today, bulldozers were busy knocking down trees where the cattle egret nests for 6 months out of the year. Every spring, the egrets come to this area of Millbrook to raise their young. But Millbrook and Elmore County officials are worried about the possible threat the birds pose to the health of children who go to school near the nesting site.
Well, there's danger of histoplasmosis where you have a bird roost and where they've been there for a number of years, because you have histospores found in the ground in different places, and it makes a good medium for the growth of the spores, the bird droppings.
Histoplasmosis is a disease that attacks the respiratory system and is fairly common in the South. Most people who contract the disease may not even know it or think they have the flu. It's rarely fatal. There have been no reported cases of histoplasmosis in the Millbrook area, and health officials want to keep it that way. That's why the nesting site near the school was declared a possible health hazard 2 weeks ago. The egrets, which originally came from South America, are protected by federal law. Commissioner of District 4 in Elmore County, Melvin Curley, says instead of killing the birds, officials can do little more than move them away from populated areas.
And we want to try to move the nesting area of these birds. We're not moving them, we're not getting them out of the area, but we are moving them away from the school grounds.
While moving the birds from one nesting site to another is not a permanent solution to the problem, it's the best way at present officials have to ensure the health of the community and to protect the egrets. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News, Millbrook.
University of Alabama officials apparently thought it wiser to talk economics, not music, in order to sell their new degree in music to the Commission on Higher Education. Vice President of Academic Affairs Roger Sayers says the state of Alabama needs to attract industry, and a strong cultural program supports that goal. Sayers says the commission has a responsibility to strengthen the arts in hard economic times. Commission member Jane Burke wasn't buying. Burke says she's not sure there's enough demand for a doctoral program in music. She cast the lone dissenting vote. Commission member Jim Grady abstained, as he did on 3 earlier votes concerning new graduate programs. Grady says AIC doesn't consider how new programs fit in with a school's old programs or its long-range plans. Grady says he expects to sit out more votes in the future. The commission also adopted a uniform system of financial reporting for the universities. According to the commission's executive director, Joseph Sutton, it's been difficult to compare how the four-year schools spent money because of different bookkeeping methods. Sutton says Governor James encouraged the commissioners to adopt one financial reporting method. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Done by the federal government, that there's nothing synonymous between. I think the important thing really is that we are an educational institution. And I think the lower court found that. I think Judge Sam Taylor found that. He had the benefit of witnesses. He had the benefit of all of the materials, and I think the court erred. Well, we have spoken to our attorneys. They are reviewing the situation. Specifically, we will petition the court for a rehearing. We will ask them to reconsider it, and we'll ask them to reconsider it in bank, meaning asking the entire court to sit to hear the case again.
Commission on Higher Education has decided to scrap all the different bookkeeping methods the universities use and insist on a single system of financial reporting. Executive Director Joseph Sutton says the change is a technical one, but should make it easier to compare how the four-year schools spent their money. As a follow-up, Sutton says the university should be audited every year. This responsibility falls to the Examiner of Public Accounts. According to Sutton, the examiner's office is auditing schools every 2 or 3 years because they're short of staff and money. Commission member Bob Word introduced a resolution that asks the legislature to give the Examiner of Public Accounts enough money to conduct annual audits. Sutton says the universities support the resolution. According to Sutton, an annual audit can satisfy critics of university spending. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
His critics will say, well, he's a flirt. If he's not, he's a grouch. And he must...
Structural
Governor Fob James wants reform of what he calls the richest retirement plan in the nation. He called a special session last June, saying the state could save $40 million a year if the legislature passed his program. However, State Retirement Systems Chief Dr. David Bronner believes the savings each year would be more like $25 million. He says the Employees Retirement Systems Board had a lot to do with that.
The board, as the governor's office and the finance director's office was informed, the board of the Employees Retirement System at its last meeting in the spring, in I believe it was May or June, incorporated the actuarial recommendations to change assumptions on certain things, for example, interest rate and death statistics and things like this. So basically, both systems now have got the most up-to-date actuarial assumptions that we can determine in the country. So I guess what I'm saying in essence is that part of the recommendation of the governor to save money has already been implemented. And
some of the money saved by the board action has already been taken into account in the general fund budget that takes effect October 1st. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
The Auburn High School Tigers were one of the toughest 4A teams in the central Alabama area last season. They were 8-2 and posted wins over 2 state champions, 3A Eufaula and 2A Dadeville. But due to a reclassification hassle, the Tigers do not compete in region play. Therefore, they are not eligible for the state 4A playoffs.
We're such a small team in enrollment. We are a 4A school, but the cutoff point for 4A and 3A is 700, and we have about 740. Which puts us really in a bind when we have to play schools such as Lee and Jeff Davis, which have maybe 4 times that enrollment.
Is there a lack of motivation at all among players because of that?
Our players are just as happy getting to play our local rivals and having a good 10-game schedule as they would be playing if we did have a chance to get in the playoffs.
To have a good team this year, Coach Davis says the Tigers must overcome a lack of size and improve in the defensive secondary. Offensively, he says they should be adequate, and he looks for stellar performances out of linebackers Mike Walker and Mark Bell, both major college prospects. The Tigers open at home the 27th with Valley. Tonight at 10 is the Benjamin Russell Wildcats. With high school football preview, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Auburn. The pride and joy of Alexander City is Benjamin Russell High School. And last season, the Wildcats had their best football record in some time, finishing 8-2. But like several small 4As in the area, Benjamin Russell does not compete in region play, not wanting to contend with much larger 4A schools. But Coach Don Roberts is hoping that will change soon.
Well, you know, deep down, everybody wants to get in the state playoffs, and we've been out now about 4 years, and we're all getting a little, itchy about it, and it's been successful financially being out, to be quite honest, but probably in the near future we're going to try to get back in. We'd like to compete for the playoffs.
To repeat last year's good record, Roberts says the Wildcats must overcome youth and inexperience, part of replacing the entire offense.
What's the key to Benjamin Russell having a successful season?
Well, first of all, our offensive line's got to come around. I don't care who you are, you've got to have an offensive line. If we get some good output there, we'll be all right. Of course, we got to play great defense. I think we will. But if we can do those two things, we're going to be competitive.
Benjamin Russell opens the 27th at Talladega. Tomorrow night, Opelika and Dadeville. On the road with high school football previews in Alexander City. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
We first settled in Birmingham 2 years ago. There were just a small handful of collectors, but we've had a number of baseball card shows like this one we're having here up there, and I think the number of people who have started collecting baseball cards in the Birmingham area has swelled to several thousand. And I know there are people in Montgomery that like it, that want to be involved to do it. It's a wonderful hobby.
Now, you brought some cards with you today, some very expensive cards. Can you talk about those?
Well, these are cards that I collected when I was very young, and I've had them for years. And when I got them, they cost probably a nickel. And today, they're up into the thousands of dollars, a couple of these cards. And they're around. There's people here in Montgomery, I'm sure, that have cards like this that are worth possibly a lot of money, and the folks don't even know it.
The conference this year brought a lot of people to the Montgomery Civic Center. About 1,000 conference delegates from counties around the state and more than 100 politicians. People seeking to win the support of what ADC officials like to call the single most important political group in the state.
Very soon we're going to need to convene your respective districts so we can start screening those.
The way the conference works is simple. Democratic candidates show up to be screened by committees of the conference. They make short speeches and they're asked a few questions. Once the committees decide who they'll favor, they take the recommendation to the full conference for a vote. ADC Executive Committee member John Knight says that vote is growing more important to Alabama politics.
I think there's no question that the importance of the vote is growing. You can take from the number of candidates that are actively seeking the ADC endorsement and who are present here today that will be participating in the screening process. It's a very important endorsement, probably, in my opinion, the most important endorsement that a statewide candidate can receive at this time.
The state chairman of the conference, Joe Reed, agrees.
The significance of this conference is that the outcome of our recommendations will determine in many instances who will win or who will lose an election. And in other instances, it will determine whether or not a given candidate will make the runoff or not. And no politician in Alabama who is really interested in seeking a statewide office will dare miss being screened by our organization. I think it's a tribute to our organization, and it's also a tribute to candidates who recognize that the blacks in this state constitute about 25% of the population, and therefore there's a segment of the population that ought to be heard.
But even though ADC leaders say endorsement by their group means a lot of votes, it clearly does not mean a shoo-in for the chosen candidates. 4 years ago, their choice for the governor's office lost. Late this afternoon, they began looking at their choices for this year's gubernatorial endorsement. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
You're fun to be around. I've prayed many prayers when no answer came, though I waited patiently long.
This is the RF-4C Phantom II jet, the mainstay of the 187th Tactical Reconnaissance Group and one of the highlights of today's air show. The 187th keeps the Phantoms airborne 6 days a week, constantly making training missions in and out of Danley Field. And for their efforts, they're known as the best reconnaissance unit in the nation. Colonel William Turnipseed, commander of the 187th.
The 187th had a week-long test where we moved all of our people from Danley down to Gulfport, flew for 4 days, and the results of all of that test simulating a war time condition was the top results that the Air Force has had in the last 4 or 5 years.
Colonel Turnipseed says the 187th was little more than a flying club when it started 30 years ago. Today, the reconnaissance group and the National Guard is a very important part of the nation's military team. There were civilian planes flying in this air show, too. There were aerobatic acts, and a different sort of flying machine, hand gliders, powered by a 9-horsepower engine. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Yeah, we've been training really hard for about the past year and a half getting ready for this. I have no doubt we'll do real well out there. Week we'll be out there, we'll be in individual training, just honing some of the skills that we've learned here in the Montgomery area. And then we're going to be taking part in an exercise called the Combined Arms Exercise, or the CAX. And it's basically about 2,500 Marines with all of their equipment and airplanes and helicopters and guns. And we're going to hone some of the techniques, of modern warfare, basically.
Chunking around here. Right, yeah. Y'all look sort of over my shoulder out here. That's good. Nice smile from Mom.
On the table, Bill, yeah. Montgomery advertising.
Ken Harvey's in the hospital. He's got, I think, I don't know, I may pronounce it wrong, epididymitis. It's an infection. We've had several kids that have it since I've been here. I've never heard of it before. Bob Hicks had it last spring, but he's going to be in the hospital another 3 or 4 days and probably 2 weeks before he can start to work. But he's got some work to do academically, so his status right now is questionable. James and Chuck Clanton, but we have some talented. I think that our kicking game.
We had originally set to run the 440 this afternoon as possible.
No question, the best looking group that I've ever been around, and with a couple of exceptions, they're in excellent shape, which is unusual for freshmen coming in. Of course, most of them have been in all-star games and working out and so forth, but they are a fine-looking group of young men. So they're finishing up running a mile over there now, running 440s. We run time 440s, and overall they're pretty good shape. I'd say they're in good.
At the top of the stretch, the mile and 35 and 4. Loma's ruler stays in front. Along the inside, Conquistador Cielo. And now Conquistador Cielo puts her hand in front. Loma's ruler on the outside is second. And Runaway Groom from Canada moves up. Runaway Groom alongside the inner two. Those three to the wire. Runaway Groom, Loma's ruler, Conquistador Cielo, Runaway Groom in front. And at the wire is Jeffrey Fellon, Runaway Groom in a tremendous upset in this Traverse Stakes. First under the wire by about a head. A very tight photo between.
I think it's significant to anyone's campaign, and I think that's the reason that this year all 3 major Democratic candidates actively sought and recruited the ADC endorsement, because it's an organization that has a history of being able to generate a strong vote for the candidate whose goals are most compatible with being able to move Alabama forward in a way that gives all Alabamians a chance for upward economic and social mobility.
Sometimes go online for
Last season was a disappointing one for the Opelika Bulldogs. They finished 3-7. But back to coach of this year, native son Joe Wilson. He hopes to instill a winning attitude to get Opelika back on the right track. And Wilson says the hardest part of his first season thus far has been making the Bulldogs believe they can win again. He says the key is to win early in what promises to be a tough schedule. He also says that may be easier said than done because the Bulldogs are returning only 8 starters.
I think right now offensively we're probably a little better because we got more returners. We have a speed burner who's a good football player in David Smith and a big fullback and an experienced quarterback. But defense is where you win, and that's where we got to work harder, and that's where we have more people who hadn't played a lot before. But I think it'll come around, and again, you know, if you'll play hard on defense, you'll be okay.
Opelika will begin their quest for a winning campaign next Friday on the road at Jordan of Georgia. Tonight at 10, the defending state 2A champions, the Dadeville Tigers. On the road with a preseason look at high school football, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Opelika. This sign at the entrance to the town of Dadeville tells it all as far as last football season is concerned. The Tigers went all the way to claim the state 2A championship. And all indications are the Tigers have the team to do it once again this season.
Well, we're not planning on letting up, but we don't know about the 2A state championship again. Of course, I'm sure it's everyone else's goals, but that's our goal anytime we line up to play.
And all indications are the Tigers can be as good or maybe better than last year's championship team. A number of experienced players return. Coach Cahey says the defense should be a strong point as always. Over the last 36 games, only 4 teams have scored more than a touchdown on the Tigers. If there's a weak point, he says the kicking game might be slow in coming around.
What will be the key for Dadeville to make it back not only to the state playoffs, but for the state championship?
We feel like it, just like all other small schools our size, injuries is a situation. If we can keep people healthy, our key people, and the attitude stays as it has been the last 3 or 4 years where the kids are real hungry, just scrap for everything that we get, then we feel like we're going to be in good shape.
Tomorrow it's on to Verbena and Wetumpka. On the road with a look at preseason high school football, Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Dadeville.